Hello Cinnamon Bun! So I'm back finally again for another video. This is going to be plot embryo stuff continued. So first of all, if you haven't seen my plot embryo video, it's my favourite plotting method, go and watch that now because otherwise none of this is really going to make sense. So since I did that video, I have been speaking to a lot of you a lot about it, and there were a few questions which I answered, and basically this was meant to be my next kind of plot embryo video, which is about tragic / antagonist / unfinished plot embryo structure, but as soon as I started to try making some notes for it, it just kind of grew arms and legs and became this huge thing, and that's because actually I've got quite a lot still to say about it. So I thought I would do this kind of part 2 and answer some of those questions for everyone instead of just in the comments, and flesh out kind of what I went through in that first video. So let's talk a little bit about how to integrate the plot embryo technique with How to Build a Novel. If you didn't already know, How to Build a Novel is my book of the system of like how I go about plotting and outlining. How to Build a Story is the video series. It's the same system though, and actually I'm thinking about renaming those videos soon so that it's less confusing, so it might all just be How to Build a Novel soon. So I'm going to post the full step-by-step of this on my website. There will be a link below for you to refer to. You can copy and paste it, you can print it off. So I'm just going to skim really quickly through it in this video. So how you start this off is going to be different depending on if you're writing an absolute brand new story or if you're wanting to plot an existing story that you've either outlined a bit or you've outlined all of it or you've written part of it, like any kind of in progress nature, that's going to be different. So let's start with a brand new story. So you're going to want to start with 3 things in front of you. 1, any existing notes and ideas and options and stuff that you have already, pull those out, have them in front of you. 2, set up a blank plot embryo. Again, if you don't know how to do that, it's in my plot embryo video. And then you want to have a blank page where you're going to be ready to brainstorm some motive things for your main character or characters. So you're going to start with a pencil and you're going to start scribbling ideas down in broad strokes for 2 things: the character motive and the quadrants of your plot embryo. So don't worry about the plot points at the moment, just think about the external and internal realms which your character is going to traverse throughout the story. So how do they start off and how do they change as a person, and where do they start off and where do they traverse in the story world and where they end up. And you're going to want to flip back and forth between these. So when you settle on either a character motive or a set of plot quadrants that you like, you can use that to extrapolate the other one. From there, just do whatever you gotta do to complete the plot embryo. Okay, so how about for a story that you've already started? First of all, write down every existing plot point that you have on a piece of paper, whether you've just outlined it or whether you've written the whole thing. If you're not sure what counts as a plot point, think of it as trying to distill the story down into as few bullet points as possible. So anything big which moves the story forward, which takes things in a new direction, that's probably going to count as a plot point. And it's okay if they're not in order or if you haven't figured out the order yet. If you've done any brainstorming of plot points which haven't yet become part of your outline or part of a draft, I want you to list those on another sheet of paper. So those are like possible plot points. So get yourself a blank plot embryo, draw it out, print it off, and start plugging these plot points in pencil. Start with the definite ones and then move on to the possible ones. Now there will probably be gaps here, there will probably be things that start somewhere and actually need to be moved somewhere else, and there might even be plot points that you've already written that actually don't really fit anywhere on this plot embryo. Then you want to look at your partial plot embryo and start trying to figure out what the quadrants are. So what is the internal realm, how does the character change, and what is the external realm, so what world are they traversing. And from there, again, do whatever you got to do to finish your plot embryo. And if it has to change a lot from what you have to what you want it to be, do that. This is not meant to be like tracking how your story actually is. The plot embryo is about making it what you want it to be. So this brings both of our different paths to a kind of reverse fork now. So for both of these processes, you do the following. Use the magic questions from How to Build a Novel to generate or flesh out any missing plot points. Then start writing your scene cards. In general, probably a scene card for every plot point, but some plot points might need multiple scenes and thus multiple scene cards, and there might be scenes which are kind of connective tissue which you need to kind of hold everything together as well. So you shouldn't just have 8 cards. So whether this plot embryo is the main plot or a subplot or something in between, it's all really a matter of scale. pick a short name for it and pick a colour to go with that, and write that in the bottom right corner of every scene card. So next to that, in a different colour, write which plot point in that embryo it is. So 1, U, or 4, search. And you may have the same plot point over different cards, remember, so don't worry about that. So then you go through this entire process again for any other plots in your novel. If that was the main plot, then you'll be doing it for subplots. If you have kind of like a bunch of different plots, which none of which are really the main one, they're all kind of equal, then go and do it for the others as well. And then you'll have a couple of stacks of cards of your different plots. And you'll be able to tell them apart because of the little plot name and the colour in the corner. And once you've got all the cards for all the plots that are going to be in your story, you can start putting them into a final order. And once you've decided that, then you can number them in the top right corner instead of the bottom, and that will be your scene number. That's all I've got for the moment. That's my idea of how to do it. So if you want to keep track of that or go through it yourself, then like I said, it's going to be on the website. So here is a question that someone asked in the Plot Embryo comments. What if what the character wants at plot point 2 is not what he/she needs? What if through the adaptation phase the character realises that what they want changes, or even if they don't come to this realisation, the 5th stop delivers them what they actually need in their life? This is a really good question. So first of all, if this is something that you are struggling with, I would definitely recommend going and checking out my video on motive from the How to Build a Novel series, because it's very related. And secondly, yeah, I mixed up my language a wee bit in the Plot Embryo video. I wasn't very clear at all because I was trying to keep everything very simple, so my language is quite imprecise in that video, and I'm going to clarify right now. Plot point 2 is definitely a need. At the time of 2, the character might be mistaken about what they need, but you still need to establish that that's what they need, even if it's kind of subconsciously. They may take off on their journey wanting something, but when they reach 5, the thing they find has to be what they actually needed, not what they wanted, if that was different. So for example, at plot point 2, something is wrong or off or missing. The main character might think that they can fix this by getting X, and they might spend 4 searching for it and getting it wrong. But at plot point 5, they find the thing that they really needed, say Y, and they realise that that's what they needed back at 2, even though they thought it was X. Might be helpful to take a piece of paper, split it in half, do the want on one side and the need on the other, just to kind of compare. There's probably going to be quite a lot of overlap between that and the internal realms of the plot embryo, so the quadrants. What the character learns, at 5 they're going to learn what they actually needed, and that's, you know what I mean, change and stuff, okay? So if you've watched my video on motive, you'll know that I break it up into 2 parts. There's the motive, so that's the thing that they actually want or need, the goal, if you will, the objective, and there's the stakes, so that's the reason for the goal. Why do they want it? What have they got to lose or gain? An important thing to note is that whether they want it or need it, both of these things need to have the same stakes, they need to have the same root, the same reason for it. It needs to be like 2 possible solutions to the same problem, even if it turns out that the character is actually wrong about that and it's Y instead of X. Okay, I think that's about as clear as I'm going to get on it. It's hard to explain and I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, there is a difference between want and need. So someone also asked, how do you do a plot embryo for a series? So from my point of view, there are 3 different kinds of series, and it's going to be a bit different for each of them. So to start with, you've got episodic series. So in these, each installment solves a particular problem and things don't tend to carry over from one installment to the next, whether that's an episode or a novel or whatever. So The Simpsons is very episodic. I'd also say probably the old Bond movies. I think the more recent ones are trying to be more serialized, but the old ones, like, you don't need to watch them in order and you don't need to have seen previous ones to understand what's going on in an individual Bond movie or an individual episode of The Simpsons. So for this kind of series, each installment is going to have its own plot embryo, and that's pretty much as simple as that. So then you've got a serialized series. So this is where things change a lot over the course of a series. It doesn't really answer one specific problem in each installment. There's probably a lot of cliffhangers on the ends of each installment, and it's kind of like one big story. So this is things like Game of Thrones and Battlestar Galactica. And for this, the whole series is going to be one huge plot embryo. If all we're talking about is the main plot, obviously, if the whole story is a bunch of subplots, there are going to be lots of plot embryos, but they're all going to stretch over the series. And then there's a mixture. So a series is somewhere in between episodic and serialized if there is both an individual main plot for each installment and an overarching arc which is furthered by each installment in the series. So this would be something like Harry Potter. And for this, you gotta do both. So you need to have one big plot embryo which covers the whole series, and you need to have individual plot embryos for the individual plots and problems which each installment answers. Next, I want to talk a little tiny bit about the 4-act structure that Larry King talks about. Again, it's a similar cyclical structure, but it's conceived in a slightly different way. So if you're interested in seeing an alternative to the plot embryo, go and check out Larry King's posts on it. It's a series of long blog posts that goes really in depth. However, here is my super short summary. Each quarter of the circle is an act. Each act has a different role for the character and for the narrative. So in 1, the character role is that of the orphan, and the role narratively is to set everything up. Act 2, the character role is that of the wanderer, and the narrative role is all about response and reaction. In Act 3, the character role is that of the warrior, and the narrative role is that of attack. In Act 4, the character role is that of the martyr, and the narrative role is a resolution. And instead of just numbering the plot points 1 to 6, they have different names, which I personally find to be a little bit confusing, but maybe they help you out. So instead of calling them just plot points 1 to 8, it's called the hook, plot point 1, the first pinch point, the midpoint, plot pinch point 2, plot point 2, and then I don't remember the last one, it might be resolution. I'm going to stick my summary up on my website as well, and if you're interested, go and check out Larry King's version. So someone else pointed out that my plot embryo cheat sheet looked a bit like a witchy kind of ritual thing, and there's actually really good reason for this. So Dan Harmon, in his actual breakdown of the plot embryo himself, says, "Why this ritual of descent and return? Why does the story have to contain certain elements in a certain order before the audience will even recognise it as a story? Because our society, each human mind within it, and all of life itself, has a rhythm, and when you play in that rhythm, it resonates." So pagan religion, or Wicca, or witchcraft, or whatever you want to call it, along with countless other religions, is also based on this kind of cycle of life and death. For example, the Wiccan Wheel of the Year looks like this. It's a solar cycle, it's based on the seasons and the rotation of the earth. So in the top half you've got spring and summer, which is life, and in the bottom half you've got autumn and winter, which is death. And in Wicca specifically, each of these points, which are plot points on the plot embryo, but on the Wheel of the Year, each of them is a festival, and they tend to celebrate and be conceived as a point in the life and death of a pagan god or goddess. So this structure of the 8-point cycle is not a new construction by any means. The plot embryo is just a particular interpretation of it. And this 8-point cycle is just an interpretation of how life on our planet works. That's why it connects with us, that's why it feels complete, and that's why it feels satisfying. We understand this cycle as being complete. And that's why stories can feel frustrating or unsettling or unfinished when they don't follow this structure. Now that doesn't mean you have to abide by it. If you want to write weird, unsettling stories, that's fine. You do you. But it's important to know why things feel complete and why this structure seems to run throughout so many things. So yeah, it's not really a practical tip, but I just thought it was kind of interesting, a little bit of theory behind the plot embryo and how it's actually a lot bigger than just being about plot. Link to that conversation in the doobly-doo as well. So if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and likes and shares are always appreciated. And if you haven't got a copy of my book How to Build a Novel already, it's pay what you want starting at £1, which is pretty decent if I do say so myself. Link in the description. And if you want to be updated whenever I have new tools, tips or techniques for writers, you should sign up to the Novelcraft newsletter, which is my email list for writers, so you get everything to do with writing from me, and you also sign up for the Preptober updates as well. It's all the same list. So I think that's everything. Okay, I'll speak to you later. Elfie has barked all through my read through this, so here's hoping. Not a new concern. So someone also, you are a nightmare. My nightmare! On hand and yeah. Those on the other about how the plot embryo compares pointed out that my why the plot embryo compared. Nah, let's start that again. Okay, well this has felt like the longest video of all time.